Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. I'm your host, as always, Clint McLean. What is going on, diehards? Welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. I'm your host, as always, Clint McLean. I am back for another top 10 this week. Hopefully you enjoyed last week's top 10 breakdown of my best UFC knockouts of all time. It was really fun to make. I learned a whole lot of lessons. Bear with me here. I'm still getting used to this video thing. This week we've got a new top 10 for you, and it looks like next week we may well be back on track for our normal UFC fight breakdowns. If you haven't heard, it looks like we are on UFC 249 is happening on May 9th, and we are getting not one, not two, but three freaking UFC cards. All back to back to back. Dana White is trying to pick up the slack. We are headed back on track, and we are going to get tons of fight action coming up. So everybody say a prayer, sacrifice an extra goat, do what you got to do to make sure these fight cards go through, because I am ready. I am so ready. Before we get this video started, we have got to give a big ol' shout out and thank you to our sponsors, the boys over at GOAT Capital Sports. Check out GOATCapitalSports.com. They break down MMA, basketball, football, baseball, all the sports that I cannot give you winners in. And I told you they were running a special last week for the NFL draft, and they crushed it. They went 7-2, I believe, on their draft picks, and they hit some big juicy lines. It was a good day for our sponsors over at GOATCapitalSports.com. I hope some of you got over there and signed up for their action and made some cash last week. Thank you very much for sponsoring the video. Go check out GOATCapitalSports.com. They are GOATCapital_ on Twitter. Give them a follow. Let them know Clint sent you, and let's get straight on into the video. This week, we are going to break down the top 10 fighters who have been affected most by the coronavirus. COVID-19. It's affected us all, and unfortunately there have been a lot of fighters who have been caught straight in the headlights of this thing, and I'm going to break down my top 10 picks for who it's been affected by most. Now remember, the criteria for this video is not necessarily who has been affected positively or negatively, simply affected. Some of these are good cases and some of these are bad cases. As always, if you disagree, hit me up in the comments below. Let me know who you think I missed. And with that, let's get on into the breakdown. Number 10, Lyman Good. Y'all remember Lyman Good? This guy looks like he is chiseled out of freaking marble. He's 34 years old, so he is just over that danger zone. And the reason I put him on this list is because he is the one and only UFC fighter that I know of who actually has publicly come out and said that he has contracted the coronavirus. Now, props to Lyman Good. From what I understand, he's actually offered to undergo blood testing so that people can use what happened to him to try and find a cure and get rid of this thing for us. If you may recall, Lyman Good is a very, very difficult fighter for us to handicap. He was on a massive win streak until he ran into Elizo Zaleski dos Santos. After that, he dropped that fight. It was a split decision, very close contest, and then he beat Ben Saunders to get back on track. They put him right back on that upward path towards the title, and he ran straight into Damian Maia where he got choked out, and we cashed in on that bet, baby. But then he hit Chance Rencounter, and something that I was not expecting whatsoever, he blasted Chance Rencounter out of there. TKO victory, reminding you just how physically impressive this guy is. I hope that there are no long-term ramifications of catching the coronavirus, because I would love to see this guy get in there before that clock ticks down to zero. At 34 years old, you've got to think he needs to make something of his career now, because we see a lot of fighters fall apart around this age range, and I would love to get a couple more years of Lyman Good in that octagon. Number 9, Tyron Woodley. Now, y'all know me. If you've been watching the show for a while, I have gone from Tyron Woodley truther, activist, and number one fan all the way to the flip side of the pendulum, where now I'm not so sure I even like the guy. He was one of the most underrated champions. He was unheralded. He was an underdog in almost every single fight he was in, even when he was the defending champion, and he just wins. That's all the guy does. And then he ran into Kamaru freaking Usman, and since then he has been chomping at the bit to get back at the title. Now we all know that because of Tyron Woodley's reign, he was never going to get that immediate rematch. Immediate rematches are something that happen in UFC, but there has to be a very specific circumstance. There's got to be a question around the way the fight was won. It has to be a very closely contested fight, or there has to be no clear number one contender behind you. And we didn't have any of those factors happening when Tyron Woodley lost to Kamaru Usman, and the fight was a one-sided beatdown. So even though he thought he could step straight back into a title shot, it just wasn't happening. Plus, the UFC does not have the best relationship with Tyron Woodley, so they're not looking to do him any favors. He was scheduled to fight Leon Edwards, and that's a fight that I very seriously believe could have got him back in the title picture. He needs to go out there, he needs to win a damn fight, and get himself back in the conversation. However, what he's been doing instead is complaining. And that's just classic Tyron Woodley. Now, the reason he is on this list at all is because Tyron Woodley is getting up there in age. He's not a spring chicken anymore, and after having already been the UFC champion, we do not see a lot of repeats. We do not see a lot of champions who drop their belt, go down the ladder, and climb back up. It just simply doesn't happen. So Tyron Woodley has lost time. In the amount of time that we have been out due to the coronavirus, he suddenly seems to have realized that he is on a ticking clock. Tyron Woodley has called out absolutely everybody. He's been calling out Colby Covington, even though that fight fell apart, and I've got my suspicions that some of Tyron's demands may have had a part in that. He's been calling out Kamaru Usman, trying to squeeze in there since there's no direct path to that title, and we're not sure if the George Masvidal fight is going to get put together. He tried to take advantage, and now he's even calling out Israel Adesanya. That's right. Tyron Woodley has started beef with the 185-pound king, saying that he is scared of power punchers. Come on, dude. You cannot be serious with this stuff. You know he's just trying to stir up some drama. You know he is just trying to create a storyline, and I don't think that anyone is biting. Tyron Woodley needs to put the pen down, put the phone down, put the damn rap microphone away, and get back in the octagon and beat somebody's brakes off to get us talking about him. He's got all the skills in the world. He could have been that GSP 2.0 that just ruled with an iron fist, but instead, he started fighting not to lose rather than fighting to win. Tyron Woodley is at number 9 on my affected by COVID-19 list simply because he's not doing himself any favors. He lost the fight that he was going to have the opportunity to prove himself in, and now he has started the dance all over again. He is not making good with this time that we have in this break. He needs to get a fight scheduled, he needs to stop being a drama queen, and he needs to get back in that cage if he ever hopes to overcome this challenge. Number 8, Gilbert Burns. Now, y'all know that one fighter that I am very high on right now is my boy Gilbert Burns. He's an excellent social media follow as well. The guy absolutely loves his memes. Go check him out on Twitter. But Gilbert Burns is another one of these guys that's in his 30s. As we all know, fighting is a young man's game, and if you let that clock slip on by you when you're in your mid-30s, you ain't gonna last that long. You need to get in there, make your money while you can, try and get your hands on that belt, and that exactly is what Gilbert Burns was trying to do. The man is on a 5-fight win streak, and he is looking ridiculous since he moved up to 170 pounds. We have been on that train. We haven't missed a bet on Gilbert Burns since he jumped up from 155, and I am loving it. When he talked about making a quick turnaround after he knocked out Demian Maia, I was licking my lips. I could not wait for that guy to get back in the cage and give him out again as another official pick. He knocked out Demian Maia in March, and especially when we had the rumors of Fight Island going on, when they were looking for late replacements to try and save UFC 249 the first time, he was one of the guys who threw in his name. In fact, I thought he was potentially going to get matched up with Tyron Woodley when his fight with Leon Edwards fell apart, and that's a fight that I would love to see. I think Gilbert Burns could cause problems for the top 5 at 170. This kid is on fire, and this has completely completely derailed him. Poor Gilbert Burns has coronavirus and COVID-19 to thank for a complete halt in his progress. Don't get me wrong, the entire sport has been on hold, so it's not his fault. It's not like we're going to forget about him. Once the sport gets rolling again and he gets back in there, people will start talking again. But you have to capitalize on your opportunities when it comes to MMA, and that's something that Gilbert Burns was absolutely doing before we ran into this problem. He is absolutely looking to be active right now, and not only has he been impressive, but he's started finishing. The knockout of Demian Maia shows us the absolute massive potential that this kid has got. I know Demian Maia is over 40 years old at this point, but nobody has been knocking Demian Maia out. We thought this was going to be a grindy 3-round decision type of win, maybe a submission loss for Gilbert Burns, but nobody really thought that he was going to go out there and crack Maia the way that he did. He is knocking on the door of the top 5 at 170, and as soon as we get past this break, I really hope we get another Gilbert Burns fight, because this dude is a runaway freight train and it's gonna happen. He's gonna be on a collision course for the belt at 170, and I personally can't wait. Number 7, Jon Bones Jones. All right, here we go again. I have long been on record as not the biggest Jon Jones fan in the world. If you've been with me listening to the podcast for some time, y'all know I like to watch the guy. I respect what he does in that cage, but outside the cage, I just don't think he's a very good person. So Jon Jones comes on this list at number 7 because due to the coronavirus situation, he has once again ran into some trouble with the law. Jon Jones on March 26th was arrested. He was drunk, he was intoxicated, and the police called responding to reports of gunfire. That's right. So this is the Jon Jones that was threatened by a judge never to come back into her courtroom ever again, because the situation would be far worse if he ever ran into the wrong side of the law. And to make matters worse, just days before Jon Jones got arrested, he had tweeted out that the world can be saved for once by sitting on your couch and doing nothing. Don't screw this up. And then he goes out and gets his ass arrested. Jon Jones is this high on the list simply because the reason he is affected by COVID-19 is actually a positive note for his career. Everyone seems to have forgotten about it. This was a massive talking point. Jon Jones getting arrested and getting in trouble again, immediately you saw Twitter call-outs, people asking for him to be stripped of the title. He was never supposed to step foot in the octagon again. They thought he was going to get locked away, but all he got off with was a slap on the wrist and a little bit of public service time. And because of that, because of this situation, everyone seems to have forgotten that the whole situation ever happened. There are bigger fish to fry in our world. Now, naturally, some of the MMA beat writers have still put a spotlight on this. Some people have still brought attention to the fact that Jon Jones has still had a spotty relationship with the law. But as fans, most people have moved on from this. And I put that as a big check mark in Jon Jones' corner, because this could have been a heck of a lot worse. Now, granted, he is one of the biggest stars in the UFC. They've gone to bat for him multiple times. And even though compared to some of his previous transgressions, this was very low on the list, I don't think there would have been that big of a reprimanding for him. He got off scot-free, simply because the world crisis that we're dealing with now. So Jon Jones, you lucky bastard, you got off light this time. And I am very much looking forward to Jan Blachowicz fisting you. Number 6, Walt the Big Ticket Harris. Now, some of you all may recall that one of the biggest stories of 2020 so far is the missing case of Walt Harris's daughter. Unfortunately, she has left us for good, and I don't really want to get back into that. That's not the type of content that you come to this page for, but we all know what happened. Tragically, after his daughter's death, Walt Harris had to take a break. He was scheduled to face Alistair Overeem in December of 2019, and because of that, that fight fell apart. Now, it looks like they have rescheduled those two. They were supposed to headline UFC Fight Night 172. However, the coronavirus has led to the delay of all UFC events. Walt Harris is this high on the list because not only has this man had to brush himself off and pick himself back up after losing a child, which I cannot even imagine the pain of doing, but now his return has been delayed. I was looking to lay a big old fat bet on Walt Harris when he faces Alistair Overeem, because God help the man that he gets to take his frustrations out on after the situation that he and his family went through. I can only imagine the fury that he is going to unleash once he gets back into the cage. Since that fight has been delayed, however, we don't know what kind of mental state Walt Harris is going to be in. I would be willing to bet you that he was chomping at the bit. He was ready to go. He was ready to rock when he was going to fight Alistair Overeem. But now we've pushed this thing back a couple of months. I don't ever question his heart. He's going to come in prepared. He's going to come in ready. However, will he have that spark? Will he have that fire, that motivation that he would have had the last time that they fought? I'm not sure. He went through a full camp, he was rearing and ready to go, and I was very concerned for the health and well-being of Alistair Overeem. But now that he's had some time to cool off, now that he potentially has come down off of the peak that is getting your body ready for a UFC fight, we don't know if he's ever going to come back up to that point or have that fury pushing him this time around. As far as I know, they're looking to have that fight rescheduled, but we don't yet know when or where it's going to take place. Walt Harris is another one of these guys that's in his mid-30s. He's 13-7, 36 years old. The clock is ticking, and climbing these hills that are in front of him, including COVID-19, that is not a positive that I'm looking at for our boy Walt Harris. Number 5, Rose Namajunas. Thug Rose, we've talked about at length on this podcast, is one of the biggest mental cases in the UFC. She has every ability. She has all the skills she needs. She could very well be back to being a title contender and potentially the champion by the end of 2020. However, she has taken a major setback due to COVID-19. Rose was slated to rematch Jessica Andrade, who she lost her title to just 1 year ago at UFC 249. However, unfortunately, that fight has been postponed due to the coronavirus and not the way that most of these other delays have been. Poor Rose Namajunas has lost not one but 2 family members due to corona-related illness. So she had to pull from that fight due to grieving. And I don't want to stay too long on this subject because, once again, I like to be funny and I like to uplift my viewers, not make them sad, but we could not ignore this one. It had to be on the list and it had to be this high. There's an argument for her to be number 1 on this list. However, I do want to spotlight maybe some of the brighter spots and didn't want to end this thing on a sour note. Rose has already been on record struggling with motivation, struggling with the hurdles of getting herself even to the cage sometimes. She went on Ariel Helwani's show back in May, and she said that she lost her will to fight. That fire had been burned out, and we were scared that she was going to retire after she lost to Jessica Andrade. The fact that she got herself back up for that fight, the fact that she was going to rematch the woman who almost snapped her neck in half and almost ended her career, speaks to just where she was. She was motivated. She was trying to get that back. She was facing her demons and getting inside the cage. And now that process has to begin again. She's going to have to face those same demons, and she's going to have to do it after getting past the loss of 2 family members. It's pain that I can't imagine. It's not a happy story, and it's one that I desperately am sad for, where our thoughts and our prayers are going out to Rose and her family during this tragic time. Number 4. Khabib Nurmagomedov. Now, Khabib the Eagle, the champion at 155 pounds. We all know exactly what was supposed to happen at UFC 249. The long-awaited Tony versus Khabib for the 5th time. It looked like it was finally going to happen, and it took a literal act of God to make that fight not go through. Fans everywhere were absolutely destroyed by this cancellation once again. And the saddest part of all is it looks like we potentially could have had this fight still held together. Khabib was training just a few short miles away from where the fights were going to take place when Dana White found his secret location, and it looked like UFC 249 was going to continue with Justin Gaethje filling in. Unfortunately, it was not meant to be. Khabib decided to go back to Russia and be with his family, which I cannot blame him one bit for. I got into several Twitter arguments with people who were saying that he was running and hiding from Tony Ferguson, and let's just go ahead and nip that storyline right in the bud. There is no MMA fighter on the roster that is scared to face another one. Every once in a while there will be bad matchups. Every once in a while, if you've got someone with a chin problem that's getting called out by a power puncher, okay, yeah, maybe they don't want to fight that guy. But these guys are professional fighters, especially when you're talking about the top 5 or the top 10. There is no fear. They are wanting to prove that they are the best in the world, and Tony and Khabib have been on top of each other for years. This fight is going to happen eventually, I guarantee it, but I don't know when. So Khabib leaving the country to head back to his home country of Russia due to the coronavirus before the shutdown, that has to be number 4 on my list. We lost the legendary Tony versus Khabib yet again. And this time, it's in serious jeopardy because Tony now has to get by Justin Gaethje before that fight has any chance of moving forward. Damn you, Corona. Number 3, Tony Ferguson. You might be able to see a bit of a pattern at this point. Tony Ferguson is number 3 on my list because not only has this affected him from dropping out of his title fight, he lost the opportunity to face Khabib for, like we said, the 5th time. But now he has a whole new challenge ahead of him. There are very few people that are as flexible and as insane as Tony Ferguson, so he might be one of the only people that can handle this kind of situation and come out on top. But the last minute cancellation of that fight, the last second pivot to facing Justin Gaethje, having that fight canceled and rescheduled not a few weeks later, that absolutely locks him in as my number 3 pick. He has been absolutely ping-ponged around for the last 2 months. He had no idea who he was going to fight. Then he did know, then he didn't know. He doesn't know where he's going to travel to. He doesn't know what the end goal is. All he knows is that he needs to get a fight, and it's all due to this virus. Tony Ferguson is another one of these guys that's in his 30s. He's been around forever. Since winning the Ultimate Fighter, this guy has been hunting for that title picture, and he may end up being screwed once again. The UFC has not done Tony Ferguson any favors whatsoever in his hunt for gold, and now that he is facing Justin Gaethje, one of the biggest power punchers the UFC has ever seen, and especially maybe the hardest hitter at 155, his path to the title is in serious jeopardy. If he fails to beat Justin Gaethje, we will only be able to look back at this and say that the only reason Tony Ferguson never got his crack at the title was due to COVID-19. Number 2, Justin Gaethje. We have capped off that pattern that y'all noticed a couple of names ago. Justin the Highlight Gaethje has been positively affected by the coronavirus the same way that Tony Ferguson has been negatively affected by the coronavirus. He now has a shot at the interim title and a golden ticket to face Khabib for the unified lightweight championship. Justin Gaethje was the odd man out at 155. We all knew that Tony was the clear number 1 contender. Everyone has been chomping at the bit for Tony versus Khabib for a long time. And with those two on a collision course, there was no room for anybody else to squeak in there, except maybe one Conor McGregor. We know that the UFC is interested in putting those dollar signs up, and Conor McGregor is the guy that pushes that needle. Fans everywhere would have flocked to Conor McGregor versus Khabib 2, and trust me, they will, because it will happen. The day that Conor versus Khabib 2 takes place, we will set a new record for UFC dollars. But Justin Gaethje has potentially earned a title shot in maybe any other division. He already would have gotten his crack, but with those kinds of names ahead of him, it just didn't look like it was going to happen. COVID-19 has provided the window that Justin needed to go ahead and get his long-awaited title shot. Tony Ferguson is the biggest hurdle to pass at 155. Since Khabib dropped out and Tony is willing to continue fighting, now Justin gets to fill in that slot. And it's a very very dangerous fight for Tony Ferguson. I think that Justin Gaethje is going to win this fight. I think he's going to end up clipping Tony Ferguson and become the interim lightweight champion, and then we will see a unification fight between Justin Gaethje and Khabib sometime down the road later on this year. And if it wasn't for the coronavirus, none of that would be possible. Number 1, Dominick Cruz. That's right, the Dominator. Who on this list deserves to be number 1 more than Dominick Cruz, except maybe Thug Rose? This is another positive spin. Dominick Cruz has been out for several years. We have not seen him compete in the octagon due to multiple health issues, multiple surgeries. The guy simply cannot stay healthy, but he is one of the brightest minds in MMA. He brings a tactician's approach to the sport that we've seen by very, very few fighters, and that's why he does so well behind the UFC commentator's desk. The guy is a genius. He makes wonderful, amazing reads, and he's done this before. Back a couple years ago, he had a long 3-year layoff due to injury, came back and immediately smashed his way to the title and won the belt. He's one of the few people who has been champion, gotten defeated, and returned to take his belt back. Can he do it again is the question. He has absolutely no claim to this title at this point. He's been so far removed from the title picture that he absolutely needs to get a win over a current contender before he can be considered in the title picture. We've got Peter Yan, Aljo Sterling, Marlon Moraes, and even Jose Aldo floating out there. He needs to beat one of them, and there was no way that that was going to happen. Dominick Cruz is definitely at the end of his career. We're probably only going to see him maybe 2, possibly 3 more times before he hangs it up, simply because his body is failing him. He also has the UFC commentator's gig that he does a very good job at. I must give him props where they're due. So why does he need to come out and fight, besides simply the desire to? Besides proving that he's the best fighter in that division in history? Well, once Jose Aldo fell out, Henry Cejudo needed a new opponent, and the UFC saw an opportunity to give a former title holder, a guy with very little shelf life left, a huge name to go on Henry Cejudo's resume, and squeeze him right into that thin window. It's a massive opportunity for Dominick Cruz. It's a huge risk for Henry Cejudo, especially at this late juncture. But you've got to think that anyone in this position would absolutely jump at the opportunity to get back at the belt so quickly. Heck, that's what Tyron Woodley has been trying to do for a whole calendar year. Dominick Cruz has been gift-wrapped the opportunity to get his belt back and all the props and perks that come with being a UFC champion. So props to him. Good luck on May 9th. But y'all know I'm in Henry Cejudo's corner. And there you have it. That is my top 10 list of UFC fighters that have been affected by the coronavirus, whether it's positively or negatively. Feel free to jump in the comments below. Did I miss anybody? Are you enjoying these lists? Let me know and I'll keep pumping them out. If you have ideas for the next list that you want to see me tackle, go ahead and put that in the comments down below. I can give the people what they ask for. Look out for the Die Hard MMA podcast next week, because we are going to be back on the handicapping train looking to make some money, and we will be breaking down each and every fight for UFC 249 and shortly thereafter the events that follow. Thank you all so much for sticking with me through this video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment, give me that thumbs up. Welcome to the Die Hard family. If you have subscribed, thank you all for the support. Stay safe, keep your family close, give everyone you love a hug. Social distancing. Don't give anybody a hug. We give them an air 5 instead. And we will see you all next week. Let's roll.